This season, we have been talking about supporting women in leadership. We've been talking about the barriers they face as they strive for leadership, the harassment that they face throughout their careers. This is Talk It Forward, brought to you by the Vancouver Board of Parks and Recreation with support from the City of Vancouver. And I'm your host, Carla Grimann. On today's show, we're bringing men into the conversation because we need their support to promote equity in the workplace. We'll be talking about why they feel it's important to remove gender barriers. We'll be talking about how they have and have not seen gender equity evolve throughout their careers, and how they hope to inspire women to consider trades like urban forestry. We'll also be talking about the difficulties of solving disputes and conflict in the workplace. Amit Ganda is the Director of Operations at the Vancouver Park Board. He started his career in 1994 as a temporary employee. He saw a job posting that said tree climber and was intrigued. He started watering and planting trees and progressed throughout the organization by occupying nearly every position in urban forestry. And when he started, he felt it was macho work, and only one woman was on the urban forestry team. Joe McLeod is a certified arborist and landscape architect, and he is the supervisor of our urban forestry team here at the Vancouver Park Board. Joe grew up in Ontario and developed a love for the forest and trees during his family's annual maple syrup making exploits. He continued his love for trees by obtaining a degree in forestry at UBC, and then furthered his education by studying landscape architecture. And thank you, everyone, and welcome back to Talk It Forward, where I'm really excited to have two guests on our show. Quite unique. We have been talking about women in leadership and the barriers that they face in the workplace and obtaining leadership positions. And I know I said sort of at the beginning of the show or in the trailer that we need the support of men in order to achieve these goals that we are trying to really reach. And happy to invite Amit Ganda and Joe McLeod from Park Board Operations on the show today. So thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
First, I really want to say thank you, Amit. This show would not have come to fruition had it not been for you. I remember probably about, was it 2 years, a year and a half ago, I came to you with this crazy idea, and I remember you talking about your daughter, and you said that, my daughter, she's super creative. She makes amazing things with Lego, and, one day she could be like an engineer or an architect or something like that. And I don't want her to have to go through some of the stuff that women have to go through to do the job that they want. And I'm wondering, what is that? What is it that you see that women have to go through to obtain leadership or to work in a male-dominated workplace?
Well, you almost have to prove yourself more so. And I feel like that's never a good place to start from. You're always behind. You have to do so much more. And it's almost expected to do that much more to move up. Now that's in general. That's a general feeling, that can be lost. And to be honest, that could be very crippling to somebody who's actually going to pursue something like that. We as parents, obviously I want my children to be successful. But as parents and as what we experience and what we see, we sometimes will start to mentor and give some direction to our children. And sometimes we do it in a way to protect them. So, a good way to protect them is by working on or eliminating some of these things that are in their ways. So what can we control before they actually pursue whatever career or whatever adventure they want to take? So when you first brought this forward, I was like, this is exactly what the heck we should be talking about, is like, how do we remove these barriers for people who do want to succeed and not have to worry about thinking through, what am I going to have to go through to actually get to where I want to be? So what can we do? And that's part of this. Part of this podcast, the stuff that you're working on, is really about eliminating some of that so that I'm not trying to protect my child from trying to pursue something that I already know is going to be daunting. So this is part of it. This is part of removing some of those barriers. So those barriers are kind of gone. by the time they're in college or thinking about whatever they want to do in life.
Thank you for that. And yeah, again, just thank you for allowing us to do this podcast. Is there anything else that you think is a barrier, or perhaps something that in your career development here at the Park Board and at the City of Vancouver that you have seen that are barriers or even harassment in the workplace that you have seen?
Well, I'm East Indian. I'm a colored minority. I've been working here now since 1994. I would say I've been quite privileged and quite fortunate in what I've gone through to get to where I am. But what I've seen also at the same place is, I started in urban forestry. Urban forestry is predominantly male oriented. When I started here, there was one female that worked in urban forestry. And when I was young, when I started here, I was about 22 years old. And it was just kind of getting on, very young, probably naive, just things are happening, things are flowing. But looking back and even being in the moment at sometimes when you have one female who's pretty much in a male dominated industry. And at the time, I think we had about 54, 55 staff. I couldn't really help but think, how would that person feel trying to, bring things forward, bring forward change, or even have an opinion? Like, how confident would somebody feel trying to make a statement or saying, hey, maybe we should be looking at things differently? I always had that feeling that, people just, they kept quiet.
Yeah. So you mentioned, that was 25 years ago. Things have progressed. How have they progressed? And I still feel that we have a long way to go. But in that time, what have you seen that has changed, that has helped things progress?
I think there's been more discussions. There's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of, here's what we should be doing. And I believe we're at a place of now it's really about actions is what's needed. I believe it's also of opportunities that come. I know we've got lots of people that have been quite successful working at the organization. We've got some great leaders. Donnie is my GM. We've got people like Karen Levitt, which is great to see because it can definitely prove that there's opportunities and there's chances of growth and career. But what I think we need to do is not only now talk about this, but I think what we need to do is action the supports, the tools to actually make sure that this is progressing, that we are supportive. Like, it should almost be automatic. I feel like we're doing this podcast about 30 years late. Probably should have been doing this 30 plus years ago.
Podcasts didn't exist then, but I hear what you're saying.
That's true. But the conversation, right? But the conversation is 30 years plus old. And right now, as we talk, it still feels like a conversation. So what is the next part of this? And I'm really hopeful, Carla, like this is, the start of more of actions, the more of supports, the more of, let's get this moving. That we're not having this conversation about like, what did you have to go over, what obstacles were in your way? Hey, let's get to the place of like, what made it successful? Like that would be kind of where we need to move to. And, we can do a lot of things. This isn't complicated to me. There's nothing really complicated about this. It's just a matter of making it happen.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the action happening. Definitely. Joe, are you still with us?
I'm with you. Absolutely.
So, Joe, you are now the supervisor of urban forestry, and Amit mentioned that, 25 years ago, there was one woman in urban forestry at the time. I'm wondering how many women are currently working in urban forestry?
That's a really good question. I'd like to say we've come a longer way, but in total, we have 5 women working in urban forestry, and that's in a staff group that's now composed of just over 70 staff. So still a long way to go.
It's okay. It's an improvement. And we're here today to chat about that and how can we improve that. So something that I always notice, though, when I'm in the office and I walk by your office door, front and center, there is a certificate. And this certificate is for a course called Be More Than a Bystander. And, you don't have your certificate from UBC or for your Arborist certificate. I was wondering, why do you have that certificate front and center? And what is that course about?
The course is basically, BC Centre for Women in the Trades partnered also with the BC Lions and I think the I'm not sure if the name of the organization exactly, but I think it's BC, like Ending Violence group or Ending Violence Association. And it's a 3-day course that's really focused on uncovering and revealing some of the biases that exists out there within the world, I would say, and especially within the trades. I was shocked to learn that only approximately 4% of employees in the trades are women in BC, and that's across all trades. And at the time, urban forestry was exactly right in step with that at 4%. So, yeah, I mean, I think the title Be More Than a Bystander is really focused on ensuring that people feel empowered to speak up when they do witness, whether they be micro or macro aggressions, even if they're not in the presence of a woman in the workplace, just, alerting people in the workplace saying like, hey, that's not cool, or that's not acceptable, stepping up. And I think it's very easy to hide from this, but I think I guess I put that there to remind everybody that we all have an obligation here to step up. And like Amit, I also have a daughter, a son as well, but seeing her growing up in this world is it's especially salient to me, and hits close to home.
What did you learn at the course, or did anything stand out for you when you took the course?
I think what stood out is at one point there was an opportunity for everybody to share kind of a story or a personal story in which they were witness to or a player in something that really woke them up to the challenges that women face, not just in the workplace, but in the world in general. And hearing those stories that everybody had, I mean, it was pretty emotional, I think, for everybody to hear those stories and also to share them. And, it was all men in that program. And without fail, every man in that group, I think there was about 15 or 16 men, all had a story without fail that was emotionally jarring to hear, like what they had witnessed or what they'd experienced, or in some cases, what some individuals had been perpetrators of, and had since, obviously come to terms with that. So that was, I think, the most compelling part of it, and everybody's commitment to, trying to move things forward in a more positive direction.
It's good. I think that, it's obviously going to take a lot of time for us to make these changes, but if we had a magic wand and could change something automatically next week, what would that change be?
It's not just something where the City of Vancouver, in this case, as the employer, can make the change, right? It's systemic. Like, we all have a role to play, but one of the key players here also we have 2 distinct unions that, represent employees that work at the city. And so those unions need to be in step with where we're going and represent the employees in a positive direction, right? And I think that's really challenging. And I don't pretend to know the answer, but that's where I think we all have a role to play, but we all need to be on the same page.
Yeah, and I think that, that is difficult for listeners that work in an environment that is not unionized. Just a bit of education. The union does have to represent both sides of the workers. There's 2 sides to the story. And whether they agree or disagree, they are obligated to represent each employee. So it's tough. It's tough. So.
Yeah. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think I speak for us all when I say I want the best for everybody. I want everybody to be the best version of themselves and to self-actualize and realize their dreams. And yeah, I don't want barriers, holding people back. So that's, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's why we're here today, is so that both of your daughters don't have these barriers.
I mean, one thing that I'm experiencing with my daughter is she started playing hockey this year. And for me, that was important because when I grew up in Ontario, none of the girls played hockey, and girls were relegated to playing ringette. And I think it was really disempowering, because my interpretation of ringette was that the boys would use hockey sticks. When their hockey sticks broke, they would give them to their sisters, and then the sisters would be left with a stick to play ringette with. So none of the girls had ringette sticks. They had broken hockey sticks. And I didn't, my sisters were older and they weren't involved in ringette or hockey, but, friends that I had with sisters that played ringette, I always shook my head and been like, why don't they just play hockey? But they're stuck with these broken sticks. And I think that's maybe a bit of a parallel to other, circumstances in the world today. And we still have a long way to go.
That is a really good parallel, actually. Does she root for the Habs?
No, she roots for the Avalanche, but and she does not have a ringette stick. It's very clear that you have a hockey stick, just like your brother.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm sure that Donnie Rosa, who used to be a professional hockey player in her time, would be glad to hear that as well. Can I ask you guys, was there any time in your career where you saw harassment occurring and you didn't do anything about it? And if you could go back in time and change that, implement some action, what would you have done?
Well, I could probably think back maybe several occasions when I first started here, and this would have been back in the mid-90s. And it was even sometimes just simple as tone that you would hear as a response back. You wouldn't think much of it at the moment, but in hindsight, you go that it had every element of what we're talking about today hidden in just the tone. And it was almost done in a way that it was derogatory, it was negative, it was almost punitive, but it was at the cost to get a laugh in the male-dominated kind of workplace sometimes. And so when you're first new, perhaps you're at a place of, what did I just hear? Wasn't that just wrong? And why is nobody saying anything? And so, if you're new and you may hear something like that and you're just uncertain, you're kind of stuck, you're almost paralyzed to say something because either you're afraid that if you say something, it's going to be held against you, you're going to fall out of favor, or any other concerns, whatever you think may be the fact that you're not saying anything. It's a very weak default place to go, but it's an easy one. And I think a lot of people go there on a very regular basis because you're not sure what to say. And as we morph and as we grow as individuals, it's okay not to know what to say, but the fact that you should say something is more important than not knowing what to say. And trying to interject and saying, wait a minute, that just didn't sound right. Or what did you just say? Or what the heck was that? And then have a conversation, because you don't even know where you're going with it. But the point is, you have to support each other. So, going back to your question, have you ever heard anything like that? Or have you witnessed anything? I would say, yeah, I'm positive I did. I know I did. And so what could have I done better? And in the moment, I was one of probably many that were paralyzed to say anything, or afraid to say anything, or didn't know what to say. And so, those are things that, when you come on as a new employee, we probably don't discuss those kind of things, or we didn't anyways back in the 90s or when I started. But those are the types of discussions we should be having. I know we talk about policies, we talk about respect in the workplace kind of stuff. Those are great. Those are great tools. So when something goes wrong and you need to use something to have a conversation. But giving the tools to people to say, hey, this is the kind of stuff we expect. We want things brought forward. If you hear anything or you see anything, we need to address those. This is not some stuff that we should be just parking, because you got to support each other here in the workplace. And so maybe those are the kind of things that we need to move forward, because back then, it happened and it's unfortunate, but nothing was done. And to be honest, that person who's not here today because they've retired didn't hear any of that then. They didn't get any support, and they left this workplace having that still as part of them leaving this workplace, which is not a good feeling. It can't be a good feeling. And I would feel like crap if I was retiring, knowing that really my time here wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah, that's hard to go, I think, your whole career like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to walk those shoes, right?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I guess I can't think of a particular instance in which, something's been said where I didn't, step up or say something. But I guess what one perception, though, is that I just look at how many workplaces I've worked in prior to the City of Vancouver and also at the City of Vancouver is there's so much, and this is just a societal observation, there's obviously so much emphasis on physical appearance that society puts on women. And when that transfers over into the workplace, that's really unfortunate, because it adds this whole other set of criteria and set of, checks and balances and kind of power struggles and power dynamics into the workplace that, I certainly don't envy all the BS that women have to go through in the workplace. And to the point that Amit made earlier about women having to work harder, like, I think about when I was working very early on as a landscape architect, and it was all deadline driven work. It was non-unionized. So you may have to work till midnight on a deadline. Well, it almost seemed that women would voluntarily work until midnight in the hopes of getting a promotion or getting advancement or falling in the right light with their bosses. And I can think of, working in City of Toronto for a planning and landscape architecture firm, and where you'd leave, 8 o'clock at night after you work on a deadline, and without fail, like the majority of the people that were there later were women. And
that comes with a consequence.
Well, yeah, often health consequences, right?
Yeah. And I think that's not healthy for anyone, right?
No, it's not.
So yesterday, I sent an email out to the women in park board operations that are on the leadership team, and they asked me to ask you a couple of questions, very simple ones. So they would like to know, how is the park board supporting more equity and inclusion for women within the workforce, park board specifically?
I mean, we have a recruitment process. So you go through that, you go through the process of itself. But I think I was speaking with recruitment probably a few months ago, because we have to obviously work within our collective agreements when we put postings out. So we do that just like anything else, you put it out. And the challenge right now is, I don't know, maybe it's just a timing, but right now getting just applications is difficult. We're just not getting even many people applying for work. But within that lens of, trying to make it more equitable, I would say park board in general and park operations, when we look at our trades in it, it's primarily driven by, like, we have our gardeners trades. And I think in some certain segments, the park board has done quite well. I think the equity ratio, for example, with our horticulture is quite mixed. I would say it's almost a 45-55 split, which is pretty good when we talk about ratios for trades. But when I go back to a place like urban forestry, which is, I think Joe had mentioned there's five females in comparison, or in a ratio of 70 plus staff. How do we improve those numbers? Like, how do we get more women in the workplace? And so part of my conversation at the time with recruitment was, well, part of it is we're not getting women into this trade even just to go in for training, because there's a block there. There's a block for some reason. And what is that block? Is it because nobody wants to get into this trade because of historical kind of past practice? It's not just here at the city, but across the province, across, of the country itself. What could we be doing better to promote opportunities and jobs? Because it is a good paying job. I would say it's a very enjoyable job. It's a great job. You're working outside, you're working with nature, you're working with trees. There's a lot of positive conversations going on out there about trees, and we talk about climate change, we talk about sustainability. Yet we can't attract women into this trade. What is stopping that? The conversation was about, can we have people going to schools? Can we get these conversations going? I remember when I was young, we used to have trades come to schools and talk about the different things. So maybe the lens needs to change. Maybe the approach needs to change, because I guarantee you right now, over the next 3-5 years, are we going to get more females applying for urban forestry jobs or trades that really don't high percentages? I don't know, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen right now organically, unless we actually put some effort into it.
I agree. So hopefully some young women are listening to this, and going into urban forestry has piqued their interest, and they look into it further. And, it might take many years, but maybe we will get some more of them applying. So you just never know. Before we wrap up, though, is there anything else that you wanted to communicate out about, supporting women in the workplace and women striving for leadership positions? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, as a parting word, I would just say stay strong and don't give up. And also don't be afraid in this day and age to, don't just suck it up, so to speak, speak up. And because, I don't know, speaking for myself, I definitely want to hear about challenges and issues that women are facing in our workplace, because we don't know necessarily what all these barriers are or what all these challenges are unless we're made aware of them. And so, yeah, speak up, and we're definitely want to support and expand opportunities for women and really balance the representation within our work group, because it makes the group as a whole much stronger, right?
I mean, this part of what we're doing today, just a conversation, that's great. But this is just, like I said earlier, this is a conversation. What I would like to see, though, next is outcomes, things that we will action. So when we want to grow this, we want more equity. We need to start thinking about everything that goes along with that to make it successful. We have work yards that need to be updated to have equity kind of related spaces. Our places should be set up, running, ready to go when women are coming into the workplace. We shouldn't be seeing a washroom that's got one stall or one space for a woman and 90 for men. We need to start thinking about like those kind of things. I know we are, because we're talking about those kind of strategies. So that's great. Those conversations are also happening. Then when we start bringing people in, when we have more women coming to the workplace, it's also, again, going back to bringing our staff along in this. They're part of this as well. So, we talk about men are part of the solution. Well, then all of us are part of that solution. So the entire workforce needs to be brought along on this positive, here's what we're trying to do, here's our narrative we want to change. We want to give them the tools, the means, and support as well to help support this action, so that when women are coming into the workplace, they're welcomed. And I do want to say I'm super, super happy that you're doing this. This is not easy, and so I do want to recognize you for what you're doing too, because this is just one chapter in this journey, and I'm glad you started this. So thank you for what you're doing too.
Thank you, Joe and Amit, for joining us today on Talk It Forward. And just thank you for being along for the journey and your words and your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Appreciate it.
This has been Talk It Forward, and thank you for joining us on today's episode, where we hope to inspire more women to enter the trades and more women to enter into operations and reach for leadership. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about how the City of Vancouver is promoting women in the workplace, visit vancouver.ca/womensequity.